right on time. I'm going to try to get us out in an hour because I know everybody's really busy. And there's not a lot of new to talk about this year, so what I've chosen to do in the PowerPoint is really just to pull out quotes, actually, from the faculty handbook that really points to and gives us guidance around some of the questions that I've heard over the past year, and also some of the things I just want to remind people of. So I'll go through this, and then we can dialogue during it, and also we'll do a Q&A afterwards. So I always like to start with our core values as they relate to the RPT process. So we obviously are holding up excellence as the key component of the entire process, the integrity of the process, honoring it, following it, making sure we are confidential throughout it, etc. Inclusiveness. If any of you were at the kickoff to the Inclusive Excellence Strategic Planning or Campus Diversity Plan this morning, you heard talk about inclusiveness in terms of perspective. And I always think of that as important in the RPT process in terms of disciplinary diversity. Innovation, celebrating transdisciplinarity, celebrating innovation in teaching, innovation in scholarship, and innovation in outreach and engagement. And collegiality. I think that this is both informs the way in which we conduct our process and also the values that we hold as members of the NKU community. So just to wrap up, we reviewed 106 dossiers overall last year. 73 were reviewed for reappointment, and I'm pleased that 72 of those achieved reappointment. Only one was a non-reappointment. For tenure and promotion to associate, we reviewed 15 cases, and again, 14 were successfully tenured and promoted, and only one resulted in a non-recommendation for tenure. And then for promotion to professor, we reviewed 18 dossiers and awarded full professor to 16 of our colleagues. Any questions? Okay, so I want to sort of touch on the faculty handbook because over the past year, we've worked very hard through PCC and Faculty Senate to make some revisions, the past 2 years really. And so I would point you to the faculty handbook and sections 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 as the sections that provide guidance for the RPT process. And to date now, all departmental and college guidelines have been completed and approved. In the case of college guidelines, I provided written approval to each of the deans for those. In case of the departmental guidelines, your deans have approved all of those, and you should have some written documentation on file for that. So the main difference, if you remember from the previous language in the faculty handbook, is that the new language really provides guidance around process, and it defers to the departmental and college guidelines for guidance around the expectations for successful tenure and promotion. So it allows each department and each college to identify their specific expectations in the areas of teaching, scholarship, and creative activity and service. And it saves the language in the faculty handbook to guide us in terms of process. Any questions? Okay. So I wanted to point out a few specific items. In the handbook, dated 2016, 3.1 under criteria, we still note that teaching effectiveness is the most important thing for us here at NKU in making evaluations for reappointment, tenure, and promotion. So we want to look at successful accomplishments, strength in all three areas, but we want to be mindful that as with our history of commitment to the teaching mission of the institution, that we still call that out as the most important. Questions? You'll just holler if you have any. In 3.2, which is procedures for decisions on reappointment, promotion, and tenure, I want to just point out again the call for absolute confidentiality. And we do every year, I have to say, have some little stumbles around this area. So I'm asking you to just be mindful that anything that takes place in the committee discussions, anything that takes place in discussions with the candidate as in one's role as a committee member within the context of the committee meeting, all of those things are absolutely confidential. 3.2.3 talks about departmental and school committees, and there was just a couple of things I wanted to point out. If the department or school has 5 or more full-time tenured members, in the case of a tenure committee, or 5 or more members of appropriate rank, a rank above the level of the applicant, in the case of the promotion committee, then the committee shall be formed from the faculty within the department or school. So I have recently received some questions about, do tenured faculty have to serve on RPT committees? And the answer in the handbook is yes, this is an obligation you have. If your department has more than the requisite 5, then there may be some election or selection that goes on. But if you have 5 or fewer, then unless you are on sabbatical, at which point it's your choice, or unless the faculty member is on leave without pay, in which case they cannot serve, then the expectation is that you will serve. Any questions about that? Yeah, Adrian?
What about phased retirement? What if the faculty member is on phased retirement?
Good question.
They can serve, but do they have to serve?
They can't. Their tenure is revoked when they start the phase.
Yeah.
They can't serve.
No, the tenure is revoked.
And there's the rest of
Is
the
tenure revoked? Is it at the end or at the beginning? We'll have to double check. Beth, yes,
The
Steve.
handbook says that when you begin phase, you revoke your tenure. So you can't serve on a tenure promotion committee if you don't have tenure.
We have to verify the language because I think it says agree that you'll revoke your tenure.
I brought my handbook.
Can you just look it up right there?
No.
Okay, all right. I think it's well, I don't know what I think. It's either at the end. I'll know in a minute.
We actually made this request last year and told the person couldn't serve.
Okay, so you're probably right. We're just going to check it. We do have a statement in the phased retirement paperwork that you give up tenure at either the beginning of your phase or the end. Stephen says it's at the beginning. Is that the end? Oh, we have it, okay. Beth will look it up and I'll read it to you in a minute. In choosing members from other departments or schools to serve on your committees, if you don't have enough tenured or full professors in your own department, preference shall be given to teaching faculty in departments or schools with affinity to the department or school. So before you look outside of NKU for someone to sit on your committee, you should look within, and you should look at departments that have affinity to your own. It is okay to have a member of the committee external to NKU, but only if the candidate the committee, the chair, the dean, and the provost approve. And in one case, we actually disapproved someone this year because their credentials did not match what would be our expectations for full professor at NKU. Okay? So be careful about going outside, certainly before you look inside. Okay, in 3.2.5, Department of School Committee deliberations, material considered by the RPT committee must include, but may not be limited to, the applicant's submissions. The committee may consider supplemental material that will aid in their decision. If material not submitted by the candidate is considered, the applicant must be notified of this material. As part of their deliberations, the RPT committee may meet with the applicant when such a meeting aids in the committee's decision process. So just to clarify, because this has come up, I would say a few times in the last few years, the committee may consider material that's not in the dossier. And an example of this that is not too unusual is if a committee wants to go out and do a search and read a piece of scholarship that might not be in the dossier, but is available online. But you have to let the candidate know that you are considering that material. And that's from the faculty handbook. Sam?
May the committee request additional materials from the applicant, and if so, is the applicant obligated to provide those materials?
Come on, good question.
The committee may request, certainly the committee can request. I don't know that the handbook says anything about the obligation of the candidate to provide it. I did the retyping of the faculty handbook myself this summer, so that I would read every single word of it. And I don't believe it speaks to whether the candidate must supply requested material. Kevin?
Would the candidate be able to refuse the committee looking at certain material?
The discussion in the committee that recommended this language to Senate for approval, and the Senate approved it, discussed that and said the committee has the right to look at material with or without the permission of the candidate, but they have to notify the candidate. Ken, you're going to keep me honest, and Steve, because I know you both were on that committee. Okay, do you know?
There's two different documents that are in contradiction to each other. One says you revoke tenure, and the other says you don't.
Where are that? Is that in, what do you mean?
One's in HR, one's in the faculty handbook.
Perfect. I find that surprising. So the faculty handbook, which is the ruling document, says applications must be accompanied by a signed letter stating that the faculty member agrees to relinquish tenure upon the effective date of participation in the PRP. I would assume that means at the beginning.
Yeah. And then the other document says at the end.
At the end. So,
Two in contradiction.
I believe the form they signed says that they relinquish it at the end
Yes,
of their phase.
that's right.
the form they sign, which is a form from,
It's a form from our office, and it's the form that has their signature, your signature, and the president's.
okay, so it's a form that the office of the provost created, so a form can be changed. But I think I would like to refer this to the PCC for consideration to make sure that, so I could go, I'm fine either way, but I think we have to clarify the intention of the phased retirement program, Does one relinquish tenure? Now, I would have to argue that's a dangerous thing to do, to relinquish tenure at the beginning of a phased retirement. Because if we come into a financial budget cut situation, you could make a case that this is not a tenured faculty and therefore that person could be actually eliminated. I don't think that's what we want to do. That's not something I would support. So I will ask the PCC to take it up. Yep, Jeff?
The reason you relinquish at the beginning is if you don't relinquish tenure, you can't draw on your retirement account.
So it's a mechanical kind of, it's a
So if you live
process.
on half your salary for 2 years, that's fine. But if you don't relinquish tenure, you're considered to be still in your position, and TA Crep will not release your retirement because you have not retired.
Yeah, so
So there's a financial implication to this that.
yeah, we'll check all that out. We'll check all that out, and we'll ask the PCC once we have a lot of it. So that may be a consideration, yeah.
So for faculty who are in phased retirement, could we interpret the shall as a may? That they may, what about serving on the RBT committee? If they're in phased retirement, they can or they can't, or
So they don't relinquish rank.
It's true, rank and tenure are two different things.
They don't relinquish rank. I think I would interpret it as a may, but I think we have to take it on for right now, maybe until we get this clarification. I don't. You're probably needing to know this right now, aren't you? We will look into it first thing on Monday. Yeah, Karen? Yeah, let us go back and look at it all. I'm not sure that's true. I don't believe it's true that if you give up tenure, you give up your rank. Because you can be appointed a professor emeritus and you have not given up rank.
That's true, but then they would then have to be appointed a professor emeritus in order to have.
They don't relinquish rank when they go on phased retirement. No, I don't think anybody favors that. Okay, we'll get some clarification. I'll send it out campus-wide. You got a note on that?
What a note.
Okay. All right. Again, 3.2.5, Department School Committee deliberations. If an RPT committee requires clarification on any procedural matter, the committee should make this request to the respective department chair or school director. Committee should not ordinarily make requests to the dean, provost, university council, human resources, or any other university official or department. Now, the chair or director may need to ask for clarification from the dean and the dean from the provost. I think what this is trying to do, and again, I'm quoting from the handbook, but what gets us in trouble in process is if other entities enter into the process before the process has played out and finished. So a candidate might be alarmed by the way in which the first committee recommendation has turned out, for example. But the solution is not to go to university council or to me or to anyone else. In fact, I will not meet with someone who is in the process. So, and deans should not either. And so we have to guide them back to the chair of the committee and the faculty handbook, because the faculty handbook is very clear in how one can ask for a reconsideration. And the reconsideration is the appropriate next step. If at the end of the entire process the candidate is not happy, there's an appeals process. Is it appeals or grievance? I have to, appeals. So, It's still a reconsideration. Even at the very end?
At the very end,
an appeal. Appeal, right, okay. Fran, stop. So it's important that we let the process play itself out and not get in the middle of it, okay? Does anybody have any questions about that? I find that a few times during each RPT season, I'm asking, you know, would you please go back to your department chair, or could you please talk to your candidate and encourage them to let the process play out? And a lot of times, the concerns are resolved through the course of the process, and if not, there's an awful lot of support and ways in which that candidate can appeal or ask for reconsideration at various steps. Okay, 3.2.6, Department School Committees, voting and reporting. This is just a reminder. Each committee member has a vote, and each member is required to vote. The recommendation of the committee shall be reported in writing to the department chair or school director and must be characterized as either unanimous or non-unanimous. The cover sheets that we now use have those boxes that you check. But it also should be in the letter. So the committee was unanimous or non-unanimous in a recommendation for. The recommendation of the committee will reflect the committee's deliberations and must be signed by all committee members. In cases where the committee is not unanimous, support for both positive and negative votes must be included in the recommendation. And so again, as a reminder, if the committee, for example, is split 4-1, and the minority opinion is able to be captured within the letter itself, and the minority member of the committee feels that his or her perspective is adequately represented that way, then that's fine. If the 4-1 or a closer split causes there to be such a strong disagreement, it might be beneficial to actually have what we've been calling a minority letter. But either way, all members of the committee must sign the majority letter. So the recommendation may be non-unanimous, but it's still the recommendation of the committee. The minority letter need not be signed, because to do so would disclose those individuals. Do you have any questions? The only other thing that the handbook says is, going back to that first part, each member is required to vote on each matter before the committee. Then it goes on to say, if a committee member has not reviewed the materials, then they cannot vote. So I don't know how y'all feel about that, but if you should serve dutifully on the committee, the obligation is to review the materials. However, if a committee member fails in that obligation, then he or she should not vote. I mean, that seems fair, right? Okay, any questions about this or today? John?
This is a simple one. When you say sign, are we talking actual signature?
We are talking actual signatures, yeah. So instead of just the chair signing, yeah. Mhm.
So when I chair meetings, including RPT meetings or other kinds of meetings, I usually follow Robert's Rules of Order, which would say that a chair shouldn't vote unless to break a tie, right? But here it's contemplating, I guess, that everyone was voting. including
That's right. The chairs of RPT or professor committees are voting members.
They should vote.
They must vote, yeah.
So is it appropriate to ask a question about 3.2.4 right now about
Sure.
who, so it says all full-time tenure track faculty are eligible to vote to elect the committee membership. In our department, we've been all tenured and tenure track people vote. Is that incorrect? Is it only those that are tenure track?
So as I was typing the handbook this summer, I did come upon that, and I thought that was a little prescriptive, given that I know different departments have different ways of doing it. So the question is, what is it in 3.2.4? Okay, eligibility on the department and school. So all full-time tenure track faculty in the department or school are eligible to vote to elect the committee membership. Only full-time tenured faculty may serve on the committee. The department chair or school director may not serve on the committee. Did I read the part you were talking about, or is it on down? Yeah, it's the very first sentence. So the question is, all full-time tenure track faculty in the department or school are eligible to vote to elect committee membership. So that would say that in your department, despite of past practice, you should allow a vote that is inclusive of all tenure track faculty. Now, if that is something you don't want, or you'd like a reconsideration around that, I would suggest you ask your PCC faculty member to take it up for conversation. Yeah.
So to clarify, that does not imply that only the tenured track and not tenureds vote.
Exactly. It says they're eligible to vote.
Doesn't tenure track entail tenure track?
Yes.
Oh, so when we, in our department, read tenure track, we're reading that as all faculty, whether tenured or on the path to tenure. Is
Right.
that the way that's supposed to be read?
Yes. But there may be departments who in the past have only had tenured faculty electing the membership of the RPT committee.
But I thought that thing was asking about the opposite, whether only the tenure track vote for the.
I don't think so. Bethany, what was your question?
My question was, because usually when things come out that involve tenured and tenure track, that's usually what it says. And when they say just tenure track, that it was prior to being awarded tenure. So our issue was that typically everybody that's tenured or tenure track in our department votes on the committee. And when we were reading this, we were concerned that it wasn't involving those that had already been awarded tenure.
Right, I understand your question now. So the way this reads, it would imply that only tenure track faculty elect the membership of the RPT committee, and only tenured faculty are eligible to serve on the committee. That's what's bothering you.
Yes.
Got it. That's what it says. Is that what you want it to say?
Well, I think it's just kind of weird because then people who are up for being reviewed are just picking who they want to review them, and
Yeah.
it's not a departmental decision.
I'm going to go so far as to say I do not believe that was the intention of the committee or this section. I've never, in fact, you saw I kept reading it because it didn't occur to me it could be saying that. So, Ken, would you make a note? I think so. I think it should read all full-time tenure and tenure track faculty. Yeah. But tenure track. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a minute ago, you said if a faculty member had not reviewed the material, he could not vote, he or she could not vote. How do we know that?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean, I can see somebody saying, well, I didn't read my material.
So right. So I think we have to rely on the ethics of the committee members. And I think that we have to rely on the other members of the committee to call that out and ask about it, if that's the sense. But unless they self-disclose, I have not read this, I don't intend to read this. I don't know how you would know for sure. Now, that could be, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I would assume that could be grounds for an appeal at the end of the process if the total final recommendation was negative. If you feel like someone, the committee, but boy, it's a tough one. Okay. Yeah.
So what if someone's unable to make one of the meetings where we discuss a candidate and we have a vote? Do they still sign the letter?
Yes, it does require, I believe, that there be participation in the process. So let me see how the language reads. So the language reads, back in eligibility. Sorry, all blurs together. Let me go back. Ask me again what you were asking me.
So we have a committee of 7.
Oh,
One
yeah.
can't make it.
So, where's the part, can somebody help me find the part about deliberations?
3.2.5.
Thank you. Yeah, it doesn't speak to that there. Where's that part where it says who has to serve? Let's see. And voting. Voting and reporting. You'd think I'd have this memorized, but it's impossible. Okay, each member of the committee shall have one vote. Each member is required to vote on each matter before the committee. A committee who has not reviewed materials submitted by the applicant or fully participated in the committee discussion of the applicant cannot vote on that applicant. Now, to be reasonable, there are times when a committee member will be at a conference or out of town or on sick leave or whatever. I think it's up to the committee's due diligence to try to make it possible through conference call, through postponing the meeting, through somehow engaging that individual in the conversation. I think the intent of this section is to say that someone who is willfully not engaging shall not vote, as opposed to someone who wants to be fully engaged but is just unable to be at the meeting. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the committee chair should find every way possible to enable that person to participate. Okay? Yes, Diana?
There's a statement that says the quorum of an RPT committee shall be 4/5. How do we reconcile the quorum statement with the requirement to vote? What does a quorum statement apply to?
So, Steve, you're the quorum master, but to me, you know, if you are, if you have the 4/5 required, whether they be fully, you know, personally present or online or, you know, on the phone, then you are fine. When it comes down to the voting, you can't vote unless you have a quorum.
Right, but if you have 4/5 and they vote, does the 5th person sign the letter?
Yes, because it is the majority opinion. But I would not, if it's just down to that person not being available to cast a vote at that moment, that person should be able to cast a vote in some other way and that be added in. No, I don't know. That probably goes against the quorum idea, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah.
So those two things don't.
I would not have a meeting in which you're going to do the vote unless all participating members are available in some way. Because, yeah, you're right. I would say that they still would sign the letter because the letter is representing the majority opinion, but the report of the vote would have to recognize that it was unanimous of the voting members available or non-unanimous of the voting members available, of the members casting votes. Okay. See, when you guys ask us this through email, we have a chance to look in the handbook and figure it out. Okay, formal reconsideration and appeal. In the case of a negative recommendation concerning RPT or any combination, the applicant has the right to a formal reconsideration. None of this has changed. Only at the level of the initial negative recommendation. I'm pulling this out because I still think, especially for our new folks, it's a little hard. So an initial negative recommendation means that the first time a negative recommendation is given in the process, the candidate has, for a certain reason, the candidate has the right to ask for reconsideration. Now, Ken, make a note of this because the language is not as clear as I would hope it would be. So, if the reason cited by the department committee means that the candidate has additional material or some way to provide additional evidence or documentation that would satisfy that negative recommendation, he or she has a right to request a negative recommendation and to present that material either in person or not to the committee. The committee then meets, considers the new material, and votes again. And the case moves forward. If at the next level, the chair or school director has a negative recommendation, and it's for a different reason, the candidate can ask for reconsideration, and so on. The thing that isn't clear we need to look at the language as it tracks through that section, because while this statement is clear, I believe the problem is deeper on. And I can't remember exactly what the problem is now, but we'll talk about it. Are there any questions about that? Tom?
Again, it might be just a language issue, but in the case of a negative recommendation concerning reappointment, promotion, tenure, or any combination of them, the applicant, do we actually tenure without promotion?
In the law school, we do. But their handbook is different, so the answer really is no. No, we used to. We used to, we don't now. Likewise, we used to hire associates without tenure. We no longer do that.
So it really isn't any combination of
Well, promotion and tenure at the associate level is a combination of both.
Law school promotes without tenure.
Yeah, he said that.
But you wouldn't allow a committee to vote for tenure, but without promotion?
No, that's not an option. Okay. Any questions about this? All right, 3.2.13 is still formal reconsideration and appeal. In order to exercise this right, the affected applicant must request the reconsideration in writing with any omitted materials attached within 10 working days of the receipt of notification of the negative recommendation. The department or school committee must send a copy, this is the part, Ken, that needs some clarification, must send a copy of the request for reconsideration to the office of the provost. for the purpose of resetting the review calendar. This is important and sometimes gets overlooked. So if we don't get notification immediately, then we don't know to reset the clock. We don't know to tell Jeff not to lock the dossier down and move it on to the next level, and it can really cause problems. So the department chair, the committee chair, the committee chair should send my office notification immediately of a request for reconsideration. Likewise, and this is the part, Ken, that needs to go in, the department chair at that level, if a reconsideration request is received, must notify us immediately. And also at the dean level. Again, because we have to communicate with Jeff and redo the tenure clock and the tenure process. Okay, any questions? Okay. Time to tenure. Candidates granted an extension are expected to meet only the criteria stated in university-approved tenure policies and letters of appointment. The candidate will participate in annual review for merit, but not for tenure evaluation. When the person is done with the stop the clock period of time, the next RPT review looks at all of the material that they've done during the time of the stop the clock. So let me explain this, because this came up this year. So there are three important elements. If a person has received an extension of the tenure clock, we don't expect them to have done an extra year's worth of research during that time. So there's no raised bar. During that time, let's say it's a 1-year extension of the tenure clock. During that year that's been granted, the candidate will not submit an RPT dossier, but will go through the annual performance review in the spring. The following year, when RPT comes around, that candidate will submit a dossier and be reviewed for the year during which the clock was stopped, as well as all of the normal time. Does that make sense? We had to kind of figure that out this year because it was a little tricky. But I think the sentence that says the candidate will participate in annual review for merit, but not for tenure evaluation, led us to the decision, us being Michael Baranowski and Ken Katkin and I, who had to interpret this, to say the annual review for merit would be the annual performance review, and the tenure evaluation would be the RPT. Okay? Questions?
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So if a candidate submits all the materials on Blackboard, but she or he has an extension, and she knows that officially she should not or he should not receive any feedback, but he wants some feedback.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with feedback. I would hope that candidates get feedback all along, but he or she will not get a formal RPT evaluation because that would provide an advantage that another candidate wouldn't have.
But informal feedback from the committee members is allowed.
At any point for anyone in the process. And in fact, I would like to see us do more of that informal feedback along the way. Okay, did you? No. So these are just some general reminders. The letters. Letters should reflect the majority view and, if relevant, a minority view. If the minority members wish, a minority letter can be included. All committee members should sign the majority letter. The committee vote should be recorded as unanimous or non-unanimous. Letters should be addressed to the next level of review and copied to the candidate and all previous reviewers. And so you don't just send the chairs, you don't just send your letter to the candidate and the committee chair, you send it to the candidate and all of the committee members, likewise with the dean and provost. Letters should be substantive, substantial, providing a thorough assessment of teaching, scholarship, creative activity, and service. So by and large, we have successfully moved away from the template letter, and in the next bullet, the conditions to be removed. Those are no longer a part of the process and haven't been for a couple of years, and the letters have been very good, very good. It's remarkable when you are part of, there are 4 independent evaluations, and to do my own evaluation of the dossier and then go back and look at the committee letter and the chair letter and the dean's letter, the strength of those letters, just how substantive they are, has just been fantastic. Yeah, Sam?
If there is a minority letter, who needs to sign it?
No one needs to sign it because everyone has signed the majority. And let me say that the minority letter is an addendum to the majority letter. So it should not go out without the all of the members of the committee seeing it. So I would not, as committee chair, have your committee members sign the majority letter until there is that addendum attached. Because if there is any sort of dissonance around that, it needs to be resolved before anything goes forward. Okay. Yeah?
So the letter from the committee chair goes to the chair of the department, not to the dean, not to the provost.
Correct.
To the chair of the department, copied to the candidate.
Exactly. And should be addressed to the chair of the department. And then remember, we try not to use the language early tenure, which has a bias attached to it. It's tenure in a non-mandatory year, or tenure in a mandatory year. So, but one thing I want you guys to think about, the handbook still says that anyone going up for tenure in a non-mandatory year has to meet a higher bar of expectations. Now, I want you to think about that. If that's what you want, fine. But I think you have to really consider the fairness and equity of that statement. If we are going to grant individuals time towards tenure from a previous institution, or if we are going to hire high-achieving faculty who happen to be ready for consideration of tenure in their 5th year, then I think you have to think about what is the rationale for asking them to meet a higher bar than their colleagues. They're either ready or they're not ready, and the process will make that determination. So I would ask that Ken, you bring this up and at least have a discussion about it. Joint appointments. This doesn't apply to very many people here, but I just wanted you to know, at the time of an appointment that's considered joint, the faculty member will have a primary home department and a secondary home department. An MOU will be drafted and will accompany the appointment letter. The MOU will lay out some very specific things about how that faculty member will be reviewed. And a couple of things to remember, because it may affect you. In the primary or home department of the faculty member, there will be an RPT committee who will review whatever RPT cases that are before them. But in the case of a joint appointment, that committee needs to add one faculty member from the secondary department, specifically to review the joint faculty member's dossier. And there is no second chair, department chair letter that is required, but if the faculty member who's being reviewed wants to ask for a letter from the second chair and include it in supporting materials, that's fine. All other parts of the process proceed as usual. Okay? All right, and then this is the last thing. We will continue to provide cover pages for each candidate. You'll get them in the departments on Monday. Beginning with last year, we didn't have and we won't have RPT reviews for first-year faculty members. Okay? RPT reviews will be conducted for all tenure-track faculty during the probationary years, beginning with the second year of appointment. And the only exception is if an extension to the probationary period or stop the clock year has been approved. Now, we got into some confusion because I've been talking about the possibility of going to 2 years out of the pre-tenure years for the review rather than every year. And we had a lot of discussion around that, but there was never a decision made, and the handbook committee decided not to put that in the handbook revisions. So as those have come out in Senate, and as they've been distributed, and then as the new handbook has come out, and in an advisory email in June, and all these things, I've reminded that we haven't ever resolved that. So other than the first year, pre-tenure faculty currently are still reviewed every year. Now, if there's a desire, and I kind of think Ken plans to bring it to PCC for discussion, I would encourage you to talk about at your department level and decide, how you want your department representatives on Senate and PCC to think about this, and I think it'll come up because I would like to get some resolution one way or another. Since it's out there, it would be nice to, right now this is the language every year. The PCC, I just said that. Okay, I think that's, yeah.
I was in touch with Emily Sumner in HR. Emily Sumner in HR indicated that TIAA doesn't care if somebody relinquishes tenure or not. The only thing they're interested in is whether or not the person has signed a document indicating they're going to interface. And as soon as they interface, then they can start drawing on their TIAA.
Okay, so whether tenure is relinquished at the beginning or at the end of the phased period is TIAA CREP doesn't care. Right now, the handbook says the beginning.
You have tenure, and then there's a form from Beth's office that says you relinquish tenure when you sign.
That's the other way around.
So the form has been around since the PRP has been around. So we need to reconcile.
But the form was updated because President Burns signed it.
Well, it might have been updated, but it wasn't updated in that way.
The language wasn't changed. It was just-
Yeah. So we need to change the form to follow the faculty handbook. And then if you guys want to change the handbook, we can change the form back. But starting now, we'll change the form. Yeah.
Actually, that's sort of a legal question, and I'll tell you why. Because faculty members who are currently in phased retirement didn't have to relinquish tenure because that's what the letter says. If someone decides now to apply and change the letter back,
We can always reissue different letters to those who are currently in, and and believe me, I will be checking with legal before we do anything, but I think the main thing is that we need to honor the language of the handbook, and then if we need to change that for some reason, then we can change that. So this is why we have Beth. She's going to figure all this out. But we'll make sure that there is an option for faculty currently in phased who may have signed something that is in opposition to the handbook to change that. my observation is that it's an important detail and we want to get it right, but someone in phased retirement is so happy to be phasing there. Usually not too concerned, but we'll make sure it gets right. Yeah, Kevin.
If we could return to something, it's simple but so fundamental, about Bethany's question of the term tenure track. I mean, we often use, in our college policies, use the locution tenure track and tenure. But for the purpose of the handbook, on the definition page, very first page, it says tenure track faculty are probationary or tenured faculty.
Right.
Probationary is that first term. So at least on the definitions page, that works
Right.
for them. I know we write documents, we like to be
Well, we want to be
strive for
consistent,
clarity.
right? Because it actually could be argued that in spite of that because it's referred to in a different way all the way through, it would default to the others. So we'll clean it up. Right, tenure track really does mean pre-tenure. And we need to get a consistency of language. Anything else? Do you guys, I mean, we're settling down, right? I mean that in terms of, we're doing the same thing from year after year now, which is good. And I feel like the PCC, we're working very well together in terms of getting a clean copy of the handbook. We've got that. But there's still work we want to do, so we'll keep having these meetings each year. Sam? And then.
Sorry. Concerning when a person is reviewed for this, first year people are not, begins in the second year. What happens if a person is credited 1 or more years towards tenure coming in? Are they considered a first year person for review, or do they go under review?
We haven't spelled that out. I would still, it would default to my judgment in terms of practice, and I would not have them reviewed in the first year, because the rationale in not having a first year review is that they need to not just get up to speed in terms of teaching and their scholarship agendas and et cetera, but also settling into NKU as a unique institution-specific group of students that they may not have encountered before. So I think that rationale holds for those. But I'm happy to have, again, PCC discuss it. It's been great having them there. Yes?
This may seem like it's totally off subject, but as I read the handbook and I see the new professional practice rankings that are in it, there is language that is very similar. Appointments, promotions, ranks, but there's nothing that really addresses all the steps that we're talking about for this. Where are we with that process? And the second part of that question is, are the people that are at lecture rank right now going to be eligible to apply for a upper rank?
By that you mean assistant professors? Or a tenured position?
No, not a tenured position.
Or a tenured track
A
position?
rank. A rank position.
So when you say that, do you mean like senior lecturer, et cetera, or do you mean moving from the lecturer rank into a tenure track rank?
Into a professional practice rank.
Oh, so there's nothing to preclude a lecturer from receiving an appointment as a clinical professor or professor of practice. Those are not tenured or tenured track positions. I have had a specific instance come to me about the desirability of doing that. And knowing that there's no additional salary associated with it, in the case of a lecturer, it's simply it's mostly a change of title. But sometimes that's important and it's a more accurate representation of what they're doing. So there's nothing to preclude that. And again, the handbook says that when you create a clinical professor or professor of practice rank, the faculty in that department have to vote to approve that. Okay? And primarily, that's meant not to diminish our tenure track faculty in terms of if we have funding for a line that was tenure track and there's an advantage to the department to hire a clinical, for example, the faculty should approve that, right? Because it's going to change the balance. But in terms of a lecturer moving, having a different, changing types of appointments, there's nothing to preclude that. And the dean and chair, the chair works with the dean works with me about that. The problem is that some people have thought that automatically meant a salary increase, and it doesn't. I mean, the money in the line is the money in the line. Yeah.
Just on the prior credit, the other reason you have a little more time is started.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the problem with the reappointment review for a first year, no matter who they are, is that September 6th deadline for the dossier. So we want them focused on other things and not dossier preparation. Other questions? Oh, okay, we're done. 1 hour. Thank you.